Hello everybody, I'm George from Ireland. So carrying on my video about whether Trump could win in 2024, and so cut to the chase, I think at the moment his chances of being president in 2025 are at about 20%. But obviously there are various things which could occur which make that go higher or lower. Well, number one, if he dies, it's down to 0%. But anyway, I want to concentrate on him being a sore loser. Now, even he left the White House. He could have refused to leave and had his fingers pried from the door of the Oval Office by the Secret Service. So he could have taken the presidential oath if he thought he'd been re-elected, but he didn't. So even Trump acknowledges that he lost the election, and yet these moronic, irrational Trumpists are claiming that he in fact won the election. Mike Pence was on the ticket, and he voted to certify the election. He acknowledged that they lost, that Joe Biden was legitimately elected. So, and being such a sore loser and saying that you actually won is not a winning strategy. Because if you won, why aren't you president right now? And some of these imbecilic Trumpists were saying he was going to be reinstated on the 4th of March, which was the old inauguration day until I think the 1940s. Now, they say Americans meant to dislike losers. Trump certainly just dislikes losers, so obviously hates himself. Well, at least he's right about something. So a sore loser is even worse than an ordinary loser. Hey, we all lose things sometimes. I've lost some things, and Trump has lost tens of billions of dollars, so he is the biggest loser. But being a whinge bag and constantly whining that you actually won is not going to do the GOP any favours. I know that'll fire up the base, but of the American population, the base is 30%, if that. You need to win over considerably more. And obviously what Trump was fantastic at doing twice was motivating people who often hadn't voted at all for a few electoral cycles, particularly uneducated whites, to vote. And can he do that a third time? And that's critical. That will make the difference between winning and losing. Obviously, it's not a binary question. Yes, he will, or no, he won't. It's to what extent will he? How many of those will he get to vote for him next time? A few of them would vote Democrat. Many would not vote at all. A few of them would vote for the fringe parties, like the Libertarian Party, the Reform Party. I don't think anyone would cast their ballots for the Greens, or sort of the polar opposite of the Republicans on almost every issue. So Republicans supposedly prize toughness, but so they must not be crybabies, which is what they're being at the moment. They should stop mewling and start formulating some policies which offer something tangible to the average voter. But hypocrisy has often worked for the Republicans. I mean, I won't even get into Afghanistan in this video. I think I'll say that for another video. The hypocrisy on that one is so enormous that it merits a video of its own. So yeah, being a sore loser appears to be what he's going at the moment, even though I don't think it's electorally advantageous, because irrational policies and dishonesty, yeah, they quite often work for him. Okay, so more about being a sore loser. So claiming you won the election is not going to be winning stratagem, because about half of Republican voters believe him. But remember, he needs to win all the people who voted Republican last time, plus a few more, if he's going to win the next election. And this thing, oh, I actually won, presumably will put off some of the moderates even more. And if the election is rigged, there's no point in voting. It's going to lose anyway. Some Republicans recognise this, and they're against false claims for the completely pragmatic reason, nothing to do with ethics, that it will actually depress turnout amongst Republican-inclined voters. So in 2016, Donald Trump said that the GOP nomination was rigged, but he won. So he has previous of telling brazen lies without any evidentiary basis. And in 2016, he said the presidential election was rigged. Again, not offering a shred of evidence of that. And again, he won. So it was yet another barefaced lie from him. So he's told lies of exactly this kind before. And it's the boy who cried wolf, except the wolf never arrives, but Trump has rightly never believed. So remember, he said that over 3 million illegal immigrants voted for Hillary Clinton, not citing any evidence, any names, or which numbers in which states, and how do you know? He just made it up. So far as I know, not a single illegal immigrant was proven to have voted in that election. Am I wrong? Were any? Okay, if so, please provide chapter and verse and names and ages and where they were caught voting and so on. And even if they had voted, we don't know they voted for Hillary. They could have voted for Trump. They could have voted for one of the other candidates. And there's no way to prove who they voted for. Therefore, he's told these stupid and absolutely transparent lies before. Why would anyone believe him? But people's capacity for self-delusion is unlimited. So the 2020 election has been the longest election of all time, having gone on for 9 months now. The Republicans lost over 60 court cases on this issue, and many of these were for Republican-appointed judges. Republican-mandated investigations yielded virtually no evidence of fraud whatsoever. Insofar as there was any fraud, it was so trifling it wouldn't materially affect the outcome at all in a single state. Anyway, so many spurious allegations about scandals are not going to work. But you know what, what's his name, Mark Twain said, that a lie is halfway around the world before the truth has got its pants on. So if you incessantly pump out these lies, there are a lot of feeble-minded people who'll fall for them. And once they got this idea in their head, it's very, very difficult to dispel that belief. And they will very firmly hold on to this belief. It becomes a matter of faith. They'll close their mind, and just say, I believe it, in the face of the most incontrovertible evidence. So, anyway, disseminating spurious allegations about scandals is not going to work. Okay, QAnon theories have a rarefied appeal. Yes, they have an emotional purchase on the base, but I don't think it's going to win over any independents. So the Republican Party's got to avoid the temptation to speak only to itself. It should not devolve into being a wacko conspiracy theory party. It needs to appeal to some floating voters, and to some Republicans who drifted away last time, like the Lincoln Project. Because the Lincoln Project, if it was worth 4.5%, that was the difference between winning and losing. The Republican Party, it needs to move on from the 2020 election and not try and fight it again. Okay, it's tedious and it's uninspiring. Al Gore recognized in 2020 that apart from being, maybe his patriotic duty, on a more partisan basis, it was disadvantageous to his party to incessantly bang on about the unjust result. That obviously he won the popular vote, but lost the Electoral College, and even it was dubious in Florida where he lost it all because those 400 hanging chads in Dade County. And at least what he was saying was true. Because the Republicans, as I keep saying, they're not going to win over any undecideds by ceaselessly obsessing on spurious claims of bogus votes. So Trump is a maverick. He's the only president who ever been elected to the presidency despite never having held any public office nor served a day in the military. And he's the only president who went from Republican to Democrat and back to Republican. So he's the only president to be bankrupt 4 times. He's the only president to be on his 3rd wife. So he's been the only one or the first one many times. So, you know, he could be the first on yet another issue. How about not Donald? Well, what if Donald Trump doesn't stand for the presidency? He might seek to hand the baton on to his daughter, Ivanka. She's the most telegenic of his brood, and she's emotionally continent, unlike her dimwit brothers. Of course, he spawned another daughter as well. Donald Jr., well, he's distinguished by having most of America's oil reserves in his hair, and he's a real sort of the unthinking man's Voldemort. Ivanka was a Democrat until 2016, as was her husband Jared. She converted to Judaism, and that will hurt amongst the Christian extremists who are a major part of the Republican base. Many would only vote for a Christian, but also she was brought up a Christian and she rejected Jesus Christ. If you're born Jewish, stay Jewish, I think a lot of hardline Republicans wouldn't have a problem with that. But fundamentalists would be appalled that she rejected her Lord. She's an apostate. And she was certainly pro-abortion a few years ago. She hasn't voiced an opinion on it. But many Christian fundamentalists would no doubt fall for a transparent, electorally calculated, shape-shifting move on that issue by her. So these people will believe anything except the truth. So Ivanka would be the first Republican woman to seek the presidency, and that would be a wild card. It might neutralize any gender advantage for Kamala Harris, if indeed Kamala Harris is the presidential candidate. It could be Trump and his daughter, as I said, you know, a balanced ticket, youth and age. But there are ways that Trump could win. How could Donald Trump win? If things go badly wrong for Biden, then Trump has a chance. Okay, and the Afghanistan situation seems to be quite bad. I think the public will forgive him. 70% of the public approve the withdrawal, only about 20% against, or overwhelmingly Republicans against him anyway. Obviously, some people are unsure about the whole issue. And what's your alternative? Stay on fighting forever? He's implementing Trump's plan. And I know he didn't have to do so, but to tear up that plan would mean that the Taliban said, okay, the conflict's back on. And said, then do you stay forever? Or do you withdraw, not having any sort of a peace deal, when they're firing at you, so you're taken off at the airport? Anyway, if the economy implodes, if there's a massive terrorist attack, or Biden really mishandles a crisis, then Trump could be presented with a golden opportunity. So a huge scandal won't sink Biden. I mean, look at the Clintons, and Trump has proved time and time again, scandals don't dent the population of the president very much. Or look at Benghazi, a bit of a non-scandal. Okay, some American diplomats got killed, they accepted extremely dangerous posting, and they could have been got out, they weren't got out. I'm not sure that's a scandal. Some Americans die in the service of the United States every year, or certainly have done every year for the past 30 years or so. Does that mean that every president should be impeached? Anyway, so I don't think JRB has many skeletons in his cupboard. He's been in the public eye for half a century. I think we would know if there was something bad about him. People say he's been a bit handsy. Clearly, the public don't believe it. So the Democrats, they won 3 states by under 1%. So those could easily go back into the Republican column next time, for the Electoral College, because that's sort of the margin of error. All right, I'm not saying that those weren't real wins. They were real wins. But, I mean, just by slightly higher, slightly lower turnout, it could go either way. And there were a further 3 states that the Democrats won by under a 3% margin. So the Republicans easily take back all 6 of those states. Even if the Republican vote nationally went down, if it just went up slightly in those 6 states, that would hand a lot of electoral votes to the Republicans. Remember, it's not winning votes that matters, it's winning them in electorally significant states. Piling up another million votes for the Democrats in California makes no difference, or another like 500,000 in Utah for the Republicans. These are ultra-safe states. So the GOP is not going to waste its effort getting even safer where it's already safe as the Bank of England. So the Republicans are trying to make it more difficult to vote, and they've long known this, and they've often been so imprudent as to say it outright. And Trump said, well, people are voting in such numbers that if this carries on, there'll never be a Republican elected in this country again. So voter ID laws could hand the Republican Party victory. Redistricting in a flagrantly partisan manner has helped the Republicans for decades, and the Supreme Court has often found that these boundaries are drawn with racially biased intent. So remember, the United States as a country invented gerrymandering, named after Vice President Elbridge Gerry, sometime governor of Massachusetts. It relies on 2 techniques, packing and cracking, as in to try and concentrate on your opponent's supporters into one constituency, where, okay, they'll get some representation, but we'll minimise their representation overall, and then spreading your own as efficiently as possible. You're not trying to win 100% of the vote. No, you don't need to. Anything just over 50%, supposing it was a two-horse race. Now, 51% is too close for comfort, so we'll have it something like 55%, and that would be more or less ideal. So it's about distributing your votes efficiently to maximise your representation, to minimise that of your opponent. They're not going to end up gerrymandering now. There's paid such dividends to them for decades. And I know it won't have a direct effect on the presidential election, but it can decide how races go for state legislatures and the House of Representatives. And that means that a Republican-run state legislature could refuse to certify a Democrat victory, even though the Democrats clearly won. And the same holds true in Congress. This was attempted in 2020, but being ever more ruthless, ever more unethical, the Republicans might do it successfully next time. A low Democratic turnout could seal the doom of the Democrats. Remember, they won by 8 percentage points in the midterms in 2018, but only by 4.5% in 2020, which is surprising because the Democrats usually do better in presidential years. The Democrats have always struggled to actuate their voters to go and cast their ballots. Opinion polls have persistently overrated the Democrats, and that's partly consequent upon the Republicans not admitting to pollsters that they are Republican, a bit like the timid Tory factor in the UK. If Biden or Harris run a lackluster campaign, then that might cause their defeat. Some racists will dislike Kamala Harris for her race, The Democrats really need to energize their base, and they're often poor at doing that. So the Democratic Party's often been its own worst enemy. It's sometimes driven by internecine warfare, and it could fall prey to a loony left faction again. It's torn itself apart several times in its history. So often, the Democrats, the donkeys they are, they snatch defeat from the jaws of victory. So will the Republicans be able to galvanize their supporters? Trump was even better at that second time than he was the first. That doesn't guarantee he'll be good at it a third time if he gets the chance. If Biden or Kamala Harris is the Democrats' candidate, that won't motivate so many Republicans to vote out of odium. Because remember, a lot of people voted for Trump because they so abominated Hillary. Anyway, if there's a strong economy, the turnout falls, and that actually hurt the Democrats more than the Republicans. And being uncontroversial works better for the Democrats than it does for the Republicans. Now, Biden is fairly uncontroversial, and actually the economy is going fairly well for him, which ironically might harm him. So it's Trump or whoever the GOP candidate would be best to try and crank up tensions, even though in the long term that's probably going to damage the party. Not in this election, but looking several election cycles ahead. Trump understands this implicitly, that the incendiary rhetoric has been successful for him, saying the unsayable, shocking people, and thereby grabbing the limelight. So Linton Crosby is this Australian political maven, and he said the dead cat strategy could work for the Republicans. That means you broach a topic that the Democrats do not wish to discuss, and that could deliver the victory to the Republicans. It's something that'd be divisive for the Democrats, as it appeals to a minority faction of the party, and then they'll be busy quarrelling with each other. So bring that up. A dead cat on the table, we just can't avoid talking about it, even though you'd really rather not. What do the Democrats not wish to talk about? An issue which favours the Republicans. It's hard to think of an issue at the time. I mean, like de-policing or whatever, defunding the police. There's that. Transgender issues, taking a knee in sports matches. I mean, that's not a political policy. The Democrats don't order people to do it, don't legislate for or against it or anything. So not being patriotic enough, these identity issues, maybe illegal immigration, but the Republicans have tried that one before. Anyway, a disastrous vice presidential pick could bring Harris down. This is what happened to McCain in 2018. Though one of my academic friends, he disagrees. This professorial pal says, actually, no, despite what people say, that Sarah Palin did help him slightly. However, the Democrats are cognizant that they mustn't have a bad running mate. In 2020, Biden picked someone with the fewest negatives. If there's a strong third-party challenge, that could divert votes away from the Democrats. That's what happened in 2000 with a particularly spirited Green campaign fronted by Ralph Nader. If all those Greens had voted Democrat, the Democrats would have won handily. And there were a few states that Hillary lost on that basis, but some of these Greens wouldn't vote at all if they didn't vote Green. So Republicans can tap into fury and frustration, as Trump did in 2016. That'll work for them. These left-behind voters, okay, they're often white working-class people. So people from Rust Belt states who rallied to him, they've suffered income compression for decades, jobs being exported. So working-class people who feel threatened by globalization, menaced by cultural change, and they think green energy is going to wreck the economy. You know, a place like West Virginia, they found his messaging very alluring. So as artificial intelligence takes more and more jobs, the impact could be ever greater. But what's the solution? To ban artificial intelligence? I mean, one of Trump's gurus, Tucker Carlson, said if he were president, he'd ban it immediately. Wow. So much for freedom to run a business, like capitalism. That's socialism, actually, the government controlling the economy. I remember the presidential candidate in 96 saying this, Bob Dole, a government which takes over the economy for the good of the people ends up taking over the people for the good of the economy. So you therefore retard the American economy, and all other economies would race ahead because they'd be able to produce goods cheaper, provide services more cheaply, more efficiently. And the United States be left behind, rather than innovating, educated, reskilling people, retooling them to contribute to the economy in other ways. So the United States would make itself uncompetitive by that, and much though Trump might sound off on that, I don't think he's going to do it. I don't think even a Republican Congress would pass some sort of ban on that. That'd be America shooting itself in the foot. So, the GOP is a corporocracy, even more than the Democrats. They do what big business wants. Trump runs a corporation, tax cuts for billionaires, not giving a damn about the proletariat. An artificial intelligence policy would win votes, but it would be an unworkable policy, and that would not stop Trump trying it. He's utterly dishonest. He's utterly shameless, and it could work in an election. So, yeah, income's falling in real terms. We're going on for 40 years. I don't think it's been arrested by Biden. And the cost of living issues, they could be good issues for Trump to talk about. The trouble is he did absolutely nothing about it as president. Not that he gives a damn about anybody else, particularly the poor. They couldn't afford his golf courses. But many blue-collar voters would buy it nonetheless. You know, he's their messiah figure, and they rally to him. He thinks he's the messiah, the chosen one, as he said, looking to the heavens. Wow. And it was staggering that all these Christian fundamentalists stuck with him despite his flagrant blasphemy. So anti-elitism is a good pitch for Trump, even though it's totally illogical. He's a WASP, New York billionaire. You don't get more elitist than that. But many working class people lap up this nonsense. Oh yeah, I hate the rich, except Trump, who's super rich. Anyway, he is anti-elitist as in he's anti-educational, anti-pedagogical. You know, he hates professors like Biden or Bill Clinton or well, Kamala Harris, not a professor, but an academic sort. He's a man utterly bereft of any refinement and subliterate, and that would appeal to the mentally subnormal. His narrow lexis is attractive to those who are uneducated, to that constituency, those who feel distinctly insecure about their own academic ability. And I'm not saying that all low academic ability people are like this, or they're to be despised or something like that, but certainly neither is knowledge or intelligence to be despised. There's not that much the Republicans can do to widen their appeal. You know, last time might even have been their peak. Obviously, it's far too early to sound the death knell of the Republican Party, much though I would like to. I sense it's still capable and dangerous. So, but they should at least ensure they don't shrink their base even faster than it's shrinking anyway. This election will be more for the Democrats to lose than the GOP to win. So a series of errors by the Democrats could seal their fate. They're capable of fouling their own nest, as we've seen before. There might be a lot of infighting. There might be some left-wingers who consider the Democrats candidate too centrist, whoever it is, and that might refuse to vote for this person. And that's one of the things that worked against Hillary Clinton or even Al Gore. Oh, not worth voting for. So the chance that Trump will win the 2024 election at the moment is 20%. Obviously, if he's still alive, it's going to go up from that. If he indeed seeks the Republican nomination, it's a bit higher than that. If he seeks it and indeed wins it, it goes higher than that. So if all those conditions are satisfied, the chance that he'll be president, inaugurated in January 2025, I'd say that's about 35%. Okay, toodaloo.